Yeah, that's absolutely fine. As long as it's clean, because it will be going out on YouTube, okay, and it will be going out live. So please be clean, okay. Hello, 10 years of the meetup. So we've got some nice photos going on if you haven't noticed already. Okay, of like the last, well, not all of them because I only had a few minutes before I left to sort them out, but a few photos of the last few birthdays that we've had, obviously pre-COVID, because it's our first one since, no, it's our second one since COVID, isn't it? Is that our first one? No, it's our first one since COVID. So yeah, so hope you all like the cakes. Thank you to Karen for the gluten-free, dairy-free cakes, and the other ones were made by myself. You can thank me later. There's some sweets for Halloween if you would like to take some. Okay, so I'm really treating you tonight. And I've got all out balloons and banners and everything. Okay, so yeah, so enjoy. I've got lovely Jude here, who's going to do her talk, and you can introduce it because I'm sure you'll introduce it better than me. But we'll get started. Are you ready?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Round of applause. I can stand up. Should we switch over? Thank you.
It's a bit stark, isn't it? I feel like I should have had like horror music or something as well. So thank you for coming to my talk on estimation. I don't know why you're here on a Wednesday night in October. Feels like it should be Halloween parties and stuff all around, but I appreciate coming to listen to a little of me. So I'll tell you a bit more about myself first. So I'm Jude. I've worked in software for 10 years in varying roles from like PMO, Scrum Master, Agile Coach, and I'm now a delivery manager. I've recently started a new job at OVO just 3 weeks ago. And oh my God, my brain is so frazzled, so bear with me today because I might stumble over my words a little bit. So there's been various industries. I also worked at Codeweavers for about 2.5 years here for a few years ago, so I never got to see these offices. This is nice. I didn't take this path on purpose. I feel like it was just like a series of, decisions, stumbling over, taking opportunities when they arrived. I've put there that I'm like agile agnostic as well, because I think that's like really important to talk about. Is like I'm not like scrum, Kanban. I'm more like, do what works and follow the principles and the values of agile, and it doesn't have to be any of those frameworks, which is actually a lesson I learned from working at Codeweavers. I've recently discovered I'm neurodivergent, so again, bear with me because I might go off track a little bit. I love learning new things. I hobby hop a lot, so I'm always trying new things and dropping it within a couple of weeks. And then I like good food and good people. I don't like when people aren't transparent with me and following the rules just because that's how it's always been. And I don't like being told what to do when I wasn't asked. So I think a lot of us can probably relate to that if you work in software delivery. So I know you probably hate this, but I'm just really keen to understand why some of you decided to come to this talk today, because I sort of looked back at my preparation and I was like, it's all wrong. And I was like, I don't actually know what people want to hear about. So I kind of want to check, because if there's things that I haven't covered in here, then maybe we can just talk about them towards the end. So is anybody sort of willing to tell me why you wanted to come to this talk?
Yeah, well, I'm always open to the idea of finding out how other people do estimation, But I'm bloody hopeless at it. But I was in a job a while back that, as a team, we were getting very, very good at estimating work. Yeah.
Why did it work?
Why did it work? What your experiences are. So.
Anyone else?
So I've worked in 4 different tech companies, 4 different ways, and then depending on which team you're in, other different ways. So based on where you've been since working at Codeweavers.
Alan, is it?
I'm normally a solo developer. I rarely work with other people. I've always worked in small companies, and so I don't actually have any formal method for estimation.
Okay.
It's always been, how long can it possibly take multiply it by 3, and then still miss it by a factor of 3. And I'm terrible at it, so I'm just here for any help.
That's interesting, actually. Okay.
Also,
Yeah. Welcome to the club. Anybody else? Anything different to that? No? Okay. Well, I think I do cover that, but if any of you have any questions as I'm going through it, then please just like jump in and we'll get into the deeper meaningfuls. Okay. So there's 5 things I want to go over today. There's context matters, like understanding where you actually are before you even start estimating. What you said, Rach, like 4 different ways, 4 different places. That's because there isn't a one size fits all when it comes to estimation. It's also a team sport. So interested in saying like you're a solo developer there. So I would say that there's probably input you actually need from other people. So that's something we can talk about. And it becomes a team commitment. So like estimation, we all know is a guess, but it becomes a commitment eventually. So that's something we need to think about. And then it is necessary. It's like obviously businesses all need some form of forecast or estimation to get going. So I feel like most of you can probably relate to this meme. So we'll start with context. So I think something that's often missing in companies is before you even start estimating is really assessing the environment that you're in. So I quite like this model, which I learned about fairly recently, but I've used successfully with a couple of teams, is the Cynefin framework, it's called. It's by David Snowden. Has anybody seen this before? Oh, that's nice. I'm teaching you something new already then. Okay, so it's a matrix, obviously, and it's based on the idea that you will respond in different ways to different situations, and that counts for estimating as well. So there's the 4 sort of areas on the outside, and the sort of simple area here, that's where things are clear. So the main thing about it is that the cause and effect is very straightforward, and you might not need like an expert to do the work. So for example, in software development, that might be things like simple text changes, for example. Then you sort of move into the complicated domain. And that's where there's like a clear relationship between cause and effect, but it will require expert analysis. So a lot of development work falls into this category because coders are experts and QA that in their fields. Like they need to have certain skills and qualifications to be able to do that. And then you move into complex, which I find is the domain that the teams I work with most often fall into. So this is where things are getting a bit more unpredictable and they're emerging over time, and you can't know everything that's going to happen. And then you've got chaotic, and those are the situations where you've got to actually take immediate action and just regain control. So that might be something like an outage or the system going down. And in the middle of all that, you've got like disorder or chaos, and that's where you don't actually know which place you're in. You actually need to take action to figure that out before you even get into estimation. So by using something like the Cynefin model to assess the context, you can then sort of start looking at what's the right estimation approach to take, because you would respond to each of these situations in a different way. So if you're in somewhere simple, you can see there it says sense, categorize, respond. So if you're sort of in a team where your data is pretty reliable, for example, you may not even need to estimate. You may be able to just go off something like your throughput, where you say, well, we get through 10 tickets a week on average, and that's how long this is going to take. Whereas when you move into the complicated domain, you still might be able to use things like data. But when you're moving into the complex domain, that's where estimation starts to get much harder. And you might want to take a more iterative approach to understanding your estimate. And you might want to do something more like relative estimation rather than data-based estimation. And chaotic, we just don't do it at all. We just act. So is there any questions about that before I continue? No? Cool. So that moves me on to like the no one size fits all approach. And that's because every team, every project, every situation it's different. So there's so many different ways of estimating. So I've listed a few there. We've got like relative, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, would be something like story points, but it can also be t-shirt sizes, which are much higher level. There's time-based estimation. So that might literally just be, I think it's going to take me 8 hours to code this, or it might be duration, where you do actually think about, well, it'll take me 8 hours, but I also have to do this, this, and this in my day, so the duration will actually be 2 days. And then you've got like your data-based estimation. Has anybody here ever heard of the Monte Carlo simulator? Yeah? Yeah, so that's where you can use either like story points or throughput, and it will basically simulate an estimation for you with also, and I think this is really good, it gives you a percentage of how confident you can be around that estimation. So for example, if you put like, I've got 17 stories I've got to get through, that will tell you based off your previous data, well, we're 85% certain that you'll get it done here. So then it's up to you and your team whether you want to take that risk or not. And obviously you can use things like cycle time, throughput, and velocity, or you can go down the no estimate. So I think there's often the situation in software development where you are given a deadline and it's immovable and there's nothing you can do about it. So it's kind of like, well, what's the point in estimating here? It's not so much estimating, it's more about negotiating on the scope, because you can say, well, I'm sorry, that isn't possible, so we're going to have to move this back. And even no estimates is an estimate, because it's like you're at least putting a time box and a scope together in there. So I would say that if you sort of learn about all of the different types of estimation, I think that's really important within a team to just experiment with lots of different things so that you've got more tools in your belt, because you don't have to use the same thing over and over again. As the situation changes, you can assess that and you can change your method. And it's also really important to think about things with data-based information and even story points. They don't stay the same. You do need to assess, like, with story points, if you have relative estimation, you might have come up with like your range. You need to be sure as a team that you're all like agreed on that range and that it's still the same and that you're doing those comparisons. So you're looking at your metrics and all that sort of thing. They are your friend. Is there any questions or anything anybody wants to know more about on those? No? Okay. So yeah, team sport. So I think there's a mistake often made where it's like it goes to a development team and it's just sort of expected that you guys know how you're going to do it. You go ahead and do it. And then they're like, why is it like coming in 5 weeks later than you said? And I think that comes back to the fact that an estimate is a team project. It's not just developers who work on it. It's QA. You might, hopefully you've got product managers, UX, even your stakeholders and your delivery people, because they're all people that you have to wait for. So it's sort of thinking about the fact that it's not just about the development effort. It's about how much waiting time has to happen to get the responses that you need of all of these people. And I always sort of refer to that as time elapsed. So you need the input of those people. You need to understand, well, what are they going to be working on at this time? Have they got the availability for us? Or is that also going to hold us back? So that you can give like a more pragmatic estimate and thinking about like your utilization as a team as well. So you might be working on a discovery as well as a delivery, as well as a bug, as well as like tech debt and all of those different things. So it's important that as a team, you might work together to figure out what utilization do we actually have. So like what percentage of time do we actually have to offer to this new thing you're asking us to estimate? And if you do sort of do a deep dive into that, I think the last few times I've done that with a team, it generally comes out between 35 and 50%. That's actually the only amount of time that you've got to put towards it. So then you can figure out a more reasonable and sort of predictable time elapsed. Refinement sessions are also really underrated, I think. If you have a really well-run refinement session, definitely with your product manager, then you can get into a really nice rhythm. So you can make sure that at the beginning you have like a bit of a triage. And you can evolve your estimates then, because the thing is with estimation, the more you know, the better it's going to be, right? So when you first do an estimate, it's going to be a complete guess. Then maybe you're going to learn a bit more and you can evolve it. So you can carry on looking at those over a few days or weeks or whatever in your refinement sessions. You can evolve them and you can get clarification from the right people as well. Take actions from that. Make sure that you're sort of saying, these are the tickets we want to refine this time. These are the tickets we're going to refine next time, until you can get yourself into a bit of a rhythm. So you have got a backlog of things that are ready to start, ready to go. And like I say, you can keep evolving those estimates. And another thing, I know that must sound really difficult, because it is difficult to make time with those different stakeholders and those other roles. But you often have to end up that they want you to compromise. Like, so they'll come back, they'll hear your estimate. Maybe it is quite realistic, where they were expecting something to take like 2 days, and you're like, well, actually, that's a month's worth of work. And then they're like, no, you have to bring it down. You must, like, let's change the scope or whatever. We'll make it better. It can be a good exercise to try and flip that conversation. And instead of like saying compromise, well, let's collaborate. Let's think of this as like an opportunity to learn, and let's change it, what we're doing. And then we can together come up with an estimate that actually makes sense and is going to be pragmatic rather than over optimistic. So yes, estimates versus commitments versus targets. So speaking about stakeholders, when you're asked to give an estimate, that is often very quickly misconstrued as a commitment. And then it's taken away, it's communicated, release dates are put out, it's communicated to customers and stuff, and then there's panic when it doesn't go to plan. And then you also have targets as well. So it's like they're the movable deadlines, but they're like, we want this to happen within this target. And it's important for you as a team and developers to understand what you're actually saying, and to make it very, very clear that when you give an estimate, you say, this is a guess, this is first pass, and it's going to have to evolve over time. I think you have to be, this is where like that authenticity at work comes in, of being like really strong, because one of your worst enemies when it comes to estimation is people pleasing. Do not give in to somebody's like demands, or like where they say this is not going to cut it. You have to figure a way to get that down. Don't give in, because at the end of the day, that estimate does become your commitment and you become accountable for it. And this is where I wanted to talk a bit about like personal and collective responsibility when it comes to estimation. So we should all take more personal responsibility for the fact that we're responsible for our own choices. And that's where I'm saying like people pleasing is your worst enemy when it comes to estimates, because if you've made a choice to say, oh yeah, okay, no, we'll get it done in 2 days, because you just want that person to go away, it's going to cause you more grief in the long run, like a lot more grief. So don't do it. And you can, as a team, like as an individual in a team, you might not necessarily agree with an estimate, but maybe you can disagree and still commit, so long as like people are willing to learn from that exercise and take into account what you've said later. If you do commit to the estimate, then you do need to own it. And that's what I'm talking about. It's your personal responsibility to sort of say, this is still very much an estimate. And I've worked with some teams who are really, really good at that. And I make sure that that's communicated to the leadership on a sometimes daily basis. It's still an estimate. It's not a commitment. It's still an estimate. Do not go and communicate that to all of the customers. So then you've got the collective responsibility. So when you're estimating within a team, if the team's committed to it, then you've all committed to it. You have that team ownership over it as well. And I talked earlier about understanding your capacity and utilization. So what I mean by that, I think most people, when you sort of start the estimation process, you will sort of think about, well, I'm going to be on holiday during this period for like a week, and we should probably reduce that, because you never know when somebody's going to get sick or hurt, or something personal happens and they have to take time off. But there's other things that you need to consider as well, which is things like the BAU that you do. The fact that a bug is probably very likely to come in at some point, always does. Or leadership will change their mind and say, well, this is a priority and you need to fit this in as well. So you can take those things into account. Actually, just having started a new job at OVO, I quite like what they call keeping the lights on. So they have like tickets where it's like, this is sort of tech debt and anything that goes for maintenance that must be done, or we're going to like go down. And as I say, you can sort of find capacity models and that sort of thing, which will generally show you when you plug in all of those different elements of your day-to-day and how that sort of unravels over a few weeks. Generally, you might only find that you've got 35% of your capacity and utilisation to offer to this estimate. And I think that makes a huge difference in getting your accuracy better over time. Obviously, having a shared understanding is really important. Like, you need to make sure that you do understand the problem that you're solving. And I know that seems like it goes without saying, but I think requirements can be very wishy-washy a lot of the time. So again, it's one of those things that if you don't understand it, if it's not clear, then push it back, because like I say, you're all a team, you've all got different responsibilities within that to get it done. Skill levels is a really important one. I've been in teams before where it's like they've sort of wanted to do a really big undertaking and we've spent like months estimating, and it'll be like, we want a 2 or 3 year forecast and all that sort of thing. And it's like, well, actually the developers chosen or whatever, they don't have the correct skill set for this type of work, but now we can't hire for that. So it's really important to assess those things as well before you start estimating. And I like pragmatism over optimism. So that's where I'm saying about like assessing that capacity and utilization and using data. Like, metrics are your friend because they're a great way of giving evidence, especially to stakeholders who might be quite difficult to deal with, to say, look, I can actually show you over time, this is what happens. And that's why you're not going to be able to get this when you want it. Or maybe you will, and then they'll be really impressed. And yeah, be clear about what you're providing. So that's where I go back to, are you providing an estimate, or are you actually saying we're confident enough to make a commitment to this now? Yes. So why do it at all? Well, this is why it's necessarily evil. And I really love that quote from Maya Angelou. We need estimates and we need forecasts because like businesses aren't going to be able to strategize and plan without them. It's about allocating people and resources at the right time with the right amount as well. Obviously setting expectations across the business, controlling costs and maximizing profit. But I put this last because it is sort of like, you can only do what you know now. So you have to just evolve things as you go, and you've got to like get people into that collaborative discussion. So it's not, estimation isn't about providing perfection. It's about providing like team and stakeholders with the information that they need to make informed decisions. So being authentic and transparent as possible is probably the most powerful tool in your box when it comes to estimation. That is all the material I've got, and I feel like it is actually really, really short. So is there anything that you guys want to know or dive deeper on? We can go into like a Q&A, if you like. Yeah?
I'd like to know more about the Monte Carlo simulation stuff.
Yeah.
Because I've not heard of that, but then I just did a quick Google and I feel like I definitely have done it.
Yeah.
Even if I haven't heard of the term for it. So
yeah,
it'd be good to get a bit more of an understanding of that and its application.
Okay. So what do you use at work for planning? Do you use like Jira or anything? Okay. So I think it's an available plugin on Jira. Monte Carlo, you can use either story points or you can use throughput. So I think you need at least 5 weeks worth of data. If it's something you look into and you think you want to try it, it's definitely worth like going back to your desks on Monday and just like getting into it, start getting that data. You basically just plug in either your throughput or story points, however you work, and you say like, this is the project. It'll give you different parameters as well. So you can say like, it's relatively well known, or you can say actually there's quite a lot of unknowns. you can put different things in, like I'm likely to keep splitting the backlog I've got. So if you've got 20 tickets, you might like split them again each time. And then it'll run a simulation where it'll go through like 300 different like outcomes that you could have over like a period of time. And then it basically just gives you like a chart which shows you how many sort of days or weeks your projection is for that, with the different percentages for the confidence on it.
So is that like simulation the idea of 300 to say, well, like if every single ticket was the worst outcome versus like on a spectrum all the way to
Yes.
if every single ticket was better than we expected?
Yes.
What's the kind of distribution on average that like it's gonna hit this date in the middle, basically?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's like, and what that gives you as a team, which I don't think you really have to use Monte Carlo as, it's something that you could just start practicing as like winging it really. It gives you that confidence level. So that's like really important, I think. One thing I didn't mention in here, which is quite a good tool, is to give like a range, because that's what the Monte Carlo tool gives you. So you can say like, I'm 40% confident we can get it done in 2 weeks. However, in the past, these sorts of things have cropped up. This has come out of the woodwork. I know that this is a really complicated area. So I'm more like 85% confident it will be done in 6 weeks. And then I think I have found, but not everybody will find this, that like leadership and stakeholders and stuff tend to respond better to that, because I'm giving them more information and I'm giving them data around it as well. Any questions? Yes.
You mentioned about refinement.
Yeah.
How important it is. What would you describe as like just a great refinement? What's a productive refinement?
So a productive refinement is, I think, owned. If you have a product manager, it should be owned by the product manager. And if you've got an engineering manager, them as well. So you should be sort of selecting tickets that bring value, but you should also be making sure that you're curating a backlog of your bugs and your tech debt and everything so that they're ready to go. You would have like a list. I tend to try and encourage teams to try and take like half an hour a week, just get into the cadence of it, because that half hour a week will make all of your other meetings a lot more productive. Because if you get into a pattern, you might have a bit of pain at first to get there, but you'll eventually get to a point where maybe you've got like 2 weeks worth of a backlog, and then you can start getting into some of the future stuff more like touch. And like I say, you can choose to revisit things and evolve those estimates as you learn more. So it's about getting into a cadence more than anything, but it'll be different for every single team that you work in, because it depends if you work in like a product environment, infrastructure, or maybe you're like doing a lot of customer support, those sorts of things. But I think just having good meeting discipline in the sense of preparing for it and selecting tickets in advance and having the discipline to prep for that meeting as well. So make sure you've all been through it. And when you actually get in there, it is like it's a quick conversation to estimate in whatever way you choose to estimate. Maybe that's points, maybe that's going through your throughput and your cycle time, etc. However you decide to do it. Does that answer the question, or was that too wishy-washy?
No, it sounds great. So like, prep is very important for it.
Prep's super important. Yeah, definitely. I think the thing is with meetings in general, we lose the discipline of them very easily, but actually it's one of the best ways to be like a more productive team, is to make sure that if you're going to have a meeting, that you've got a goal, like this is the outcome we want to achieve, this is the agenda, and this is the prep work. And I've sort of taken quite a militant stance in the past where if people haven't done the prep, I've said, we're not having the meeting then. Go away and do it, and we'll move it to another time, because otherwise it's a waste of your time, isn't it? And we all hate being in meetings back to back all day, every day, right? I've had that today. New job, so. Anyone else? Hi.
If you're making estimates that sort of seem perfectly reasonable at the time, but you find that you're sort of consistently underestimating,
yeah,
do you have any sort of tips or sort of common pitfalls that people find?
So I would look at the capacity and utilization part for sure. So like thinking about like the time elapsed. So do you use a Kanban?
I'm a solo dev as well.
You're a solo dev? Okay. So I would, even if you're a solo dev, I'd put something like that into place because it will help you to get some more data so that you're not going off a hunch. You can see like where's your waiting time happening, because that's often one of the things. A really good book to read, especially as like if you're on your own, is what was it called? Making Work Visible by Dominica de Grandes, where she goes through the 5 time thieves, which is like unprioritized or too many priorities, unplanned work, basically overcommitment. So like overcommitted work in progress. If you're solo developers, I will probably guess that a lot of it comes back to too much work in progress. So like that's the root cause, and that's what you've got to address. It's not your estimation that's the problem, it's the commitment that is being put on you. Yeah. Anybody else? Rach.
Book recommendation. Is there any other ones that you'd recommend to grab it? Not necessarily just for solo developers, but from a peer's perspective as well.
Oh, well, I recommend that one to everyone. It's like my Bible. It's really good, especially for addressing like root causes of things. I think. Let me have a think on that one, and I'll see if I can write some down for you afterwards. Because I read a lot, but they've gone out of my head now fast. Anyone else? It doesn't have to be an estimation. I'm a delivery manager whilst you've got me, so if there's anything else around that you want to know.
Well, what we can do is we have an open discussion afterwards, so we can get them that. Yeah?
Cool.
Cool. And I'll be able to talk about that now.
Okay. Shall I?
Thank you ever so much. Just switch us back to the photos so people can look at those rather than a blank screen. There we go. See, it's nice and pretty, isn't it? So, thanks so much, Jude. That was fantastic. So, thank you. I think that's probably got us all thinking. So, there's probably some questions that we might want to put down after we've given them some thought. But for those of you who haven't been here before, it's a while since you've been. After we have a little break now. And during that break, we have a table past the cakes. You've got to walk past the cakes, I'm afraid. There's a table over there with some post-it notes on. You can write down your questions. It doesn't have to be related to the talk. It can be just questions in general, stuff that's going on in your mind that you want to have a discussion about. Might just be a topic that you want to have a chat about. But basically what we'll do afterwards is we'll collect them all together, we'll come back and we'll have a small discussion. Well, I say a small discussion, sometimes they might be quite big, depends on the topic and how much you want to talk about it. But we'll come back and we'll discuss those topics until the night ends. You can get involved if you want to. If you want to sit back and listen, that's fine too. Okay, so what else was there? Oh yeah, when we're doing the talks, when we're doing the questions, okay, we'll say the question or the topic, okay, and whoever's written that down will get a moment just to have a little bit of a preamble, explain what their question means and what they're sort of expecting from it, and then we'll then open it up to the room, and by show of hands, we'll go around the room and we'll discuss it. We have 3 minutes on each of those questions. And then when that 3 minutes is up, we'll then have a show of hands to if we want to carry on or if we want to go on to the next question. If we want to carry on, then we carry on for another 3 minutes, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense? Yeah? Great stuff. So, there's stuffed beets left, there's cakes, there's sweets, and there's open discussion ready for us to jump into. If anyone didn't know, there's drinks in the big American fridge here. If you want to get a drink, or there's coffee, and there's one of us on hand, we can show you how to use that if you want to. So yeah, thank you ever so much for coming, and we'll speak to you in about, what do you reckon, 15 minutes, 20 minutes? Yeah? 15, 20 minutes. Okay, lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was great. Yeah, it was. It was. The thing is, like, it's nice. Like, you do this thing, like, I agree. And then you go, oh my god, I remember this.
Oh, right.
You know, you
I have no idea that.
I felt like when I was going through, it was really like too light touch.
I think to make it perfect, like,
They do stuff differently.
I think you go too deep.
Not bad, not bad. Coconut oil.
Oh, is it the big?
Big.
She's having it.
I'm not why not. That is shocking. This from about a
So yeah,
month
if
ago.
you go too deep,
She has like back.
Oh, right.
when you put that,
I will be. I will be looking at one column.
Coconut oil.